What's going on, everybody? Mortym here, this time bringing you my talents video for Divinity Original Sin 2. Now, as I mentioned in the previous two videos I've made for this, a look at character creation and how the combat system works, I wanted to go over all of the talents since it's a pretty long list and it affects not only the combat portion of the game but also all of the other aspects, including the civil and basically the sneaking around, all the stuff you do outside of combat as well. And as you can see, it's a pretty large list. So, starting basically with the basics, all of these ones up here with the black dots are the ones I actually have, which should come as no surprise, and the ones down here in red are the ones you can't get for whatever reason. For instance, Picture of Health requires Warfare 1, which I don't have, or in some cases, they're incompatible with other things I have. For instance, Executioner is incompatible with the Pawn. Now, I don't actually have the Pawn, but I also have to have Warfare 1 for this, so it still is redded out. Now, when you start the game, you will get at least two of these right off the bat simply by being your race or your origin. Now, I am playing as an Undead Elf, which gives me Undead and Corpse Eater. Undead coming from obviously being undead. Instead of healing through regular means, I heal through poison, and healing damages me, pretty Final Fantasy-esque. And then we have Corpse Eater from being an elf, which allows us to eat body parts to access their memories, which is actually pretty useful. It is one of the more useful skills and talent rather, simply because when you eat these, you can actually learn combat skills. You can actually learn talents from some of them, believe it or not. For instance, we have trade secrets. We actually got that by eating a body part, so that is also something you can do. Now, I'm going to go through this entire list, and then at the end, I'm actually going to give you some recommendations on which one you should use. Now, some of it will, of course, vary by what you're playing, but there are definitely some that are better than others just straight up. So, like I said, going to go through the entire list, and then I'll leave a timestamp for my recommendations towards the end of the video. Now, most of these are pretty self-explanatory, but some of them I will show you if I feel it requires it. Now, starting with the ones I have, we have All Skilled Up. All Skilled Up grants you an extra combat and civil ability, which are exactly that, your combat abilities, which affect all the various parts of combat, what you can learn skill-wise, and the passive effects that you get from having bigger ones, and your civil abilities, which is how you can persuade, better trading, lore master, telekinesis, which is moving stuff without strength, sneaking, and pickpocketing, of course, picking locks, all that stuff. All Skilled Up gives you 1 point each immediately. It also requires level 2. Corpse Eater, I already explained. Lone Wolf is definitely one of my more favorite ones. However, it's only useful if you are playing by yourself or with one other character in your party. Lone Wolf will give you 2 extra action points, 2 extra recovery action points, which essentially means you can have 8 and you get 2 more every turn. You get plus 30% vitality, plus 30% physical armor, plus 30% magic armor, and double invested in points in attributes and combat abilities besides polymorph, and that is simply because polymorph gives you more attributes. So if they were to double that, you'd be getting insane amounts of attribute points. And then this is only in effect while you are by yourself or with one companion. If you choose to take on more than that, which you can do, you simply won't get the bonus. It'll just drop off, and then if you were to go back to being by yourself, it will come back. Then there's a personal favorite of mine, which is actually Pet Pal. Pet Pal does exactly what it says it does. It enables you to talk to animals. Now, on its surface, that might seem kind of boring, but Pet Pal actually gives you access to a rather large amount of quests that you will not see otherwise. You don't necessarily need this on your main character, but you definitely want it on at least one person in your party. For instance, you might see this ghost chicken over here. You get an ability in Act 2 that allows you to see ghosts, and then Pet Pal, if you are looking at ghosts of animals, Pet Pal still applies to them. As you can see, I can speak to this chicken if I wanted to. Now, we're actually going to take our leave because I don't much care about what this chicken has to say. I'm already on that quest. I just wanted to show you guys kind of how that works. Now, from there we have Trade Secrets. Trade Secrets, again, is pretty self-explanatory. It gives you +1 to bartering, which makes it easier to buy and sell things. Undead, again, if you're undead, you heal from poison instead of healing from regular healing. Then we have Ambidextrous. If you are using a one-handed without like a shield, your offhand is empty, you can use grenades and things for 1 less action point. Pretty useful if you are focusing on grenades, because there are a few talents that actually make grenade builds possible, but it is a little niche. Arrow recovery. Arrow recovery gives you 33% chance to recover special arrows. So you can craft and find special elemental arrows or effect arrows that like knock opponents down, that kind of thing. And this will give you a 33% chance to recover those, as they are a single-use arrow. It's not all that useful. Honestly, there are quite a lot of them, and you find them all the time. Then we have Bigger and Better. Bigger and Better immediately grants you 2 extra attribute points. The problem with Bigger and Better is that 2 extra attribute points is a single level of attribute points. So it's not that this is bad, it just, in my opinion, there are better ones to spend it on. Then we have Comeback Kid. Once per combat, and if an enemy lands a fatal blow, Comeback Kid will help you bounce back to life with 20% health. If you die and are resurrected in combat, Comeback Kid will be available again. Comeback Kid is actually really good. It will actually save you a lot on resurrection scrolls. It makes higher difficulties easier. So elemental affinity is a little touch and go. It can be good, but some elements like fire, for instance, obviously if you're standing that even as a wizard, which primarily uses fire spells, you're still getting burned. So this one's touch and go. Depending on how exactly you're playing your character, it can or cannot be useful. Then we have Escapist. Escapist allows you to flee combat even when enemies are right next to you. So if you watch my combat video, there's the option to flee combat. You'd have to use that when enemies are a decent distance away from you, or it doesn't work. So essentially what this allows you to do is for that character to flee immediately. However, I don't really recommend this because on higher difficulties you shouldn't be fleeing anyway, and they'll give you that retreat as a valid option tactic, but it's just simply not something I agree with. Then we have Far Out Man. Far Out Man increases the range of skills and scrolls by 2 meters. Does not affect melee or touch range skills, of course, so Shocking Touch and the things like that still don't work. However, your long range stuff definitely does. Very useful for any long range caster or archer. 5-star Diner doubles the effects of food and potions. Again, pretty self-explanatory one there. So, for instance, this healing potion right here, if I were to get 5-star Diner, it would heal 660 vitality instead of 330. Now, we also have Gorilla. While sneaking, Gorilla increases attack damage by 40%, very useful for rogue characters. Hothead, while you are at maximum vitality, Hothead grants 10% extra crit and 10% more accuracy. I would tell you this sucks. This is actually one of my least favorite because it sounds really good until you actually play the game for a while. And, I mean, they're going to burn through your magic and physical damage really fast. This sounds better than it winds up being. Then, as we scroll down, we have Leech, heals you while standing in blood. A decent one for warrior characters, but I'm pretty ambivalent about it. Then we have Living Armor, which adds 35% of all healing you receive to skills by skills or consumables to your magic armor. So, whenever you heal, it just adds 35% of it to your magic armor down here, which will help protect you from statuses that are blocked by magic armor. So, from there we have, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. It gives you 3 extra points in your memory attribute, and basically that affects the amount of skills learned. So essentially what that does is give you 3 extra memory slots. And if we come over here to our skill book, as you can see, we have memory slots represented by this brain and slots used. This will essentially give me 3 more of those, and then I can pull and add skills to it as I want. Now, it is worth noting once you get higher level skills, some of them require 2 or 3 slots individually. But most of those also require source points, which is a whole other thing. But moving on, then we have Morning Person. When resurrected, you resurrect to full health. This is a pretty average one. It's not bad, but it's also not one of my favorites. Opportunist gives you the ability to perform attacks of opportunity. Again, pretty good, but you won't get a lot of benefit out of it unless your guys are all clustered up, which is something you wouldn't want to do anyway. Then we have Parry Master, gives you 10% dodging while dual wielding, which will help, again, your rogue characters survive the game a little more. Then we have Savage Sortilay, maybe? I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that either. But it gives all of your magic skills a critical chance equal to your critical chance. Now, again, this is one of those ones that it's kind of for niche builds. So all of your magic skills, of course, get the crit chance that you have. The problem with that is the only skills that give you crit chance is wits, and that maxes out at I believe it's 20 at the most. Essentially, you have to put a crap ton into wits to get a decent one out of that. As far as I know, I have yet to actually hit a cap on an attribute point, so I don't know what it is. However, at some point, you're going to want to actually put it in these three, which would give you your damage bonuses rather than crit chance. So it's not that it's bad, but add on top of that the only weapon that gives you crit chance is actually ranged, then it just seems like there are better ways to go in terms of magic dealers. So it's just kind of an odd one. You could definitely make a niche build out of it. I'm 100% positive of that, but it just seems like it would take a lot more work than some of the more simple approaches. Then we have Slingshot. Adds an extra 5-meter range to your grenade throws. Like I said, if you were to combine that with, I believe it's ambidextrous, yeah, you can actually make a pretty useful grenade bow, or grenade build. And then from there we have Stench. Will decrease everyone's attitudes towards you by 25%, but melee opponents will less likely target you. Essentially, it's protection for your ranged at the expense of their personality. Not one of my favorites just because persuade checks are everywhere in this game. So unless you just want to completely build up persuade on one person and only use that person for talking, which is a perfectly viable method, mind you, I wouldn't recommend it otherwise. Then we have the Pawn. The Pawn permits your character one extra action point of free movement per turn. It is not compatible with the Executioner, which I'll show you why in a minute. Then we have Torturer, which increases the duration of damage statuses caused by your skills and surfaces by 1. This isn't terrible, but much beyond fire, it's not really all that great. See, this is only for the damage ones. The incapacitating ones are not affected by this, so it's not as good as it sounds. For things like burning, of course, it's pretty great. The ones that actually deal damage. However, the ones that you would really like to last longer, the incapacitating ones, do not actually get any effect from this. Then we have Unstable. Unstable makes you explode in a bloody cloud when you die, dealing 50% of your vitality as physical in a 3-meter radius. So this was actually better when the game first launched. This actually dealt 100% of your vitality as physical damage. However, towards the end of the game, that got crazy, especially if you were a warrior, because your vitality was very large. In some cases exceeding 10,000 once you actually get closer to the level caps and the better gear in the game. So essentially you could just make a death build where you'd run a guy in there and he'd kill everything when he died. So they nerfed that pretty fast. They nerfed it down to 50%. It's a little more reasonable now. It's still not a bad way to go for warriors. Then we have Walk It Off. Walk It Off reduces all status durations by 1 turn, including positive statuses, but does not affect statuses with a duration of 1 turn. So this is touch and go. So this is basically the exact opposite of Torturer. You won't take damaging things for nearly as long. However, all of your positive stuff won't last longer either. And then, of course, anything that lasts 1 turn still just lasts 1 turn. Then we have Water Rush. Water Rush increases your recovery and maximum action points by 1 when your health is below 50%. I don't really recommend this one, honestly. It's not that it's bad, but again, it's just kind of one of those more niche ones. Then we have Demon. A character with Demon has an extra 15% fire resistance, but takes a 15% penalty to water resistance, and fire resistance is raised by 10, the maximum that it can be. It also requires Pyrokinetic and is incompatible with Ice King. Ice King is essentially the exact opposite, but flips the elements. Now, if you combine Demon with a Lizard character who already has natural fire resistance, you can actually get, I believe it's almost 25% fire resistance right out of the gate, which of course is not a bad way to go. Then there's Duck Duck Goose, which allows you to evade attacks of opportunity because most enemies have that by default. Attacks of opportunity, I mean. There are a few that don't, but most of them do. Elemental Ranger. Shooting arrows will inflict bonus elemental damage depending on the surface your target is standing in. Very useful for any archery build. If you're using an archer, I 100% recommend using that. Executioner. Executioner gives you 2 extra action points after dealing a killing blow, requires Warfare 1, and you cannot use it with the Pawn, which gives you free movement of 1 action point per turn. Then we have Glass Cannon. Glass Cannon, you start every combat round with maximum action points, but magic and physical armor do not protect you from statuses. This one sucks. It sounds good at first because you get as much action as you possibly can take in one round. However, magic and physical armor not protecting you from statuses is awful, because statuses are a huge thing in this game, especially at the higher difficulties. If you get knocked down or stunned, it's a really big deal. You lose your next turn. So if I have zero protection from that, that is the definition of glass cannon. If you're getting hit, you're just dead. It's awful. So then we have Ice King, which, like I said, is the exact opposite of Demon. And then we have Picture of Health. Gives you extra vitality, 3% for every point in Warfare. For Warriors, that's a really great one. So now that we've been through the entire list, we're going to go ahead and talk about some of my favorites. Ones that I think you should absolutely get on your main guy, or at least have one in every party. Now, one of my favorites is actually Lone Wolf. If you are playing just by yourself, which is a viable way to do it, mind you just got to be a little more careful, or if you only really care for one of the extra party members that you can recruit, then Lone Wolf is amazing. It's a really fun way to play, which essentially is because it just beefs up all your guys, your points, your action points specifically. It feels like your turns are a little more meaningful because you get so much extra every turn. It's just a fun way to play, and compared to having 4, you also don't have to micromanage everyone's gear and everything. It saves you money in that particular realm in the long run. So there's just a lot of benefits to Lone Wolf. It's definitely one of my favorites. Pet Pal, actually, like I said, is a huge one. You will miss out on so many quests if you don't pick this up. I would argue that you will probably miss a third of this game's quests if you do not have someone in your party with Pet Pal. It doesn't need to be on your main guy, but someone needs to have this, or you might as well not even play the game, honestly. That's how I feel about it. So, from there we have All Skilled Up. All Skilled Up is great because it gives you the extra combat and civil points, which allows you to just go out and do more. You're better at combat, and you're better at all of the non-combat stuff, like sneaking around, thieving, or you can be a better persuasion artist. Now, these max out at 5, but things like gear and stuff will allow you to push it past 5. So I personally can't put any more points into thievery because at a base I have it at 5. But I could still pick up extra points from gear and things. So moving down the list, Bigger and Better. It's one of those ones that sounds really good, so I actually don't recommend this one at all because it sounds good, but extra attribute points, that's just one level. So why would I put essentially a talent, which I only get one every, I believe it's 3 levels, just for attribute points that I get every level? Like, you'd be better off picking something that really helps your play style rather than Bigger and Better. Comeback Kid. Again, one of the better ones. This will save you from dying as much, which saves on resurrection scrolls. It can be a lifesaver in closer combats. I would tell you the in-game boss battle is definitely way easier if you have this on higher difficulties. That's most of the ones I would definitely recommend. Beyond that, I would definitely pick up Executioner on as many people as possible, especially if you are using Lone Wolf, because it is not incompatible with Executioner, which means on top of all the extra action points I get from Lone Wolf, I can then kill something and get 2 more. So that's a big one. Luckily, Glass Cannon is actually incompatible with one of my favorites, but I don't recommend Glass Cannon, again, because of the 0 protection from status effects. So if I get knocked down, I lose my turn. And if I have enough physical armor, I can prevent being knocked down. However, this guarantees that I'm always going to get knocked down by any attack that knocks me down. And I'm just not alright with being completely vulnerable to every incapacitating effect that there is. Even if I get maximum action every round, it's just not useful. So definitely one of my least favorites. If you're playing a more tanky warrior character, Picture of Health is awesome. So Warfare maxes out at 20. Yes, 20. Or no, it's 10, but it's 20 with Lone Wolf. That's what it is. And then you can, of course, still get more points with gear and things like that. So if you're not using Lone Wolf, you're getting at least 30% more health if you put 10 points into Warfare, which is actually not that difficult to do. With Lone Wolf, it would be almost 60% more vitality. And then any extra points beyond that coming directly from your gear, you could push it even farther. So as you can see, for a warrior, that's really helpful. Now, your characters like rogues and archers, they shouldn't be getting hit as much anyway, so that obviously wouldn't be as useful. Elemental Ranger, if you're playing with a crossbow or any kind of ranged weapon that shoots arrows, you really need Elemental Ranger. It'll change your whole game up. It will inflict elemental damage based on the surface your target is standing in, and that's going to be a big one. Now, there are certain ones that are, of course, immune to status effects, and then in those cases it wouldn't be that great. But Elemental Ranger is a really fun way to play if you're playing with an archer or anything like that. So to sum it all up, the talents that I would absolutely recommend picking up on basically any character are as follows. All Skilled Up, Lone Wolf, Pet Pal, and Executioner. Those 4 are some of the best, in my opinion, out of this entire list. Now, that's not to say that a lot of these aren't useful. That's not to say that you can't build some really cool builds with these that revolve almost entirely around specific ones. But those 4 are definitely the ones I would want regardless of how I was playing the game. And that's why I definitely recommend them. Me personally, I pick up Lone Wolf because honestly, I don't like too many of the predetermined party guys, and if you choose other ones, like you can hire mercenaries that have 0 personality if you want, but I would rather just pick the one companion that I want and then play with Lone Wolf. And sure, you miss out on some of the companion quests, if you will, but Lone Wolf is awesome. It just you feel a lot stronger with Lone Wolf, which is why I'd recommend it. Now, depending on what build, of course, that you're playing, you could definitely exchange some of them or, just pick up different ones. That would definitely be good. But those are the 4 that I 100% recommend. You should definitely give them a shot. So if you feel differently about it, by all means, let me know down in the comments section below. But I hope this was helpful for you. And if it was, please subscribe. But thank you so much for watching and have a great day either way.